Final Fantasy VII is most likely one of the most well-known JRPGs out there just due to how it impacted the scene when it came out back in like the 90s. And I think it's still making quite a big of a scene, especially with the remake. And I think that really shows how iconic the game is. But no game is without its flaws, even with the original Final Fantasy VII. And I've gone back into it just due to finishing Final Fantasy IX, and also since the remake came out and a lot of people are talking about it. But no, with this video, I'll be talking about the original release back on the PS1, mostly just because that's the only version I own because I own it on Steam. But nonetheless, please sit back and enjoy the video. I think one of the staples of some of the older Final Fantasy games has to be the ATB system, and frankly, I think it's one of my favorite systems in any JRPG, and Final Fantasy VII pulls off really well. And I think I've said this in my Final Fantasy IX video of my likes and dislikes, and that one's actually really slow, but thankfully Final Fantasy VII isn't like that. It's really fast paced, and there's a small amount in between actually when you click the command to attack to actually attacking, and it's again super fast paced, and frankly I just feel like it's really enjoyable and it gives you a lot of good action. And another part of the gameplay that I really like is the magic system, and frankly this one actually does it really well. And because in most Final Fantasy games, each character has a certain role to play. Where, for example, there was the White Mage, the Thief, the Dragoon, and whatever else. But what Final Fantasy VII does is that they have the materia system, which again, as I said before, I really like. This allows any character to use any skill, any passive, or any summon, and then I think this allows that you can actually have a bit of creativity between the characters. For example, Barret and Cid both have pretty high HP stats, so you can put something like life on them, so that way they can like revive party members, since they can also stay the longest, since again they have the highest HP stats, so they can help support some of the other units. And they also have some pretty high attack stats, so you can also put counterattack on them too. Of course, counterattack can work on any other character too. It can also work decently well on something like Cloud or Tifa, just because they have pretty high strength stats. But again, I would prefer putting on Barret and Cid, just because they have pretty high HP stats, so they can get more use out of that passive skill. Something that's pretty common in the PS1 era has to be the pre-rendered backgrounds, and I think Square pulled it off really well here, just because I think a lot of the backgrounds look really nice. Some of my favorites have to be the first Mako reactor you go to, the Temple of the Ancients, Cosmo Cannons, and just a bunch of the other caves, just because again they look really good, and I think a lot of the pre-render backgrounds in a lot of the other games look good, and Final Fantasy VII again is also an exception to that, just because again they look really nice. The next thing I actually haven't seen a lot of other RPGs do, and that has to be the optional team members. This can bring some extra playtime to the game and also makes the world's lore a little bit more interesting, just because there are other things outside that you can also go out and experience. And in some cases they actually bring side quests to the game, like for example everything you do at Wuta with Luffy or Luffy, I don't know how to pronounce the name exactly, and the cave with Vincent that you can go to meet his old friend Lucia, which is also part of the backstory with Shinra and stuff like that, and I just find that stuff to be kind of interesting. Now we move on to the story and the characters, and frankly I find both of these to be somewhat decent. Getting to see the backstory of characters like Barret and Red 13 make the characters really interesting in my opinion, and seeing this kind of stuff that Shinra was up to in the past and how Sephiroth was created was both shocking and somewhat sad for the people involved. And frankly, I think some of the stuff that relates back to Vincent and how he was created was also kind of really sad, and I think it relates back to his backstory, which if you get him, I think you can experience, since I think you can experience like near the end of disc 2 or something. But like I think all of that stuff is also still pretty sad and shocking. And then there was the minor stuff with Cloud and how I think he had to deal with Zack's death and a bunch of other stuff that I can't really remember on the top of my head or from what I haven't seen yet. But still, like what I remember is that he did have some memory problems, and then he just loses himself and forgets who he is. But then later on he just finds himself, which I find kind of cool, and at least that's what I can remember. Now I think it's a good time to move on to what I disliked, and I think the first thing I disliked was the materia system. Don't get me wrong, I still think it's one of my favorite ways to customize the characters, but again, I still do think it has a few problems. Like, for example, the amount of grinding you have to do just to level them up. Game to rank 2 with most spells would take you a really long time, and frankly, I think that's kind of just bullshit. I know you can, like, there are probably some easy ways to grind up the levels, but I still think it's pretty annoying, especially in the early games, since you would just have the level 1 spells for quite a while, and then even then the summons also have the same thing. Well, you just have to grind up so you can actually use them a lot more in the battle, which I still find somewhat annoying. And then there's the lack of unique material, and I think there actually is none in the game. Every character can use any material, which is actually good for customization, but I think that kind of sucks just because, there aren't character unique ones, and that way I felt if there was, and they could have taken use of their best stats, like for example, as I mentioned before, Sid and Barrett have pretty high HP stats, so maybe they can have unique material just for them. Like I know, like for example, if you have them set with cover, since they can take hits for other characters, but it's not unique to them since any character can use it. But that's just honestly that's just a minor trade-off for how open the system is. So honestly, it's just a minor complaint to me at least. Then we have the methods of how you get these optional characters, and frankly, I think they both have their very extreme levels of bullshit. Like, I think actually start with Yuffie, and frankly, with her, you actually have to randomly encounter in a forest when you get out of like the mine area, which wouldn't be that bad, but the chance you can actually get her is like 12%, so you're gonna be in that forest for quite a while. And then right after you talk to her, you also have to like answer certain things to her questions or responses. And then if you don't get it right, I think she just leaves the area and you have to find her again. And say, for example, if you pause the game, like like go off to the stat menu where you use the items, equipment, and stuff like that, she leaves. Or if you go to that save point, she also leaves. And frankly, that's just pretty stupid. And then with Vincent, albeit his is a lot more manageable because you can actually go find all the codes for the save. That's not hard, but what is really dumb for some reason is that like you can't go over the number that's listed in the code. Like I think one of them is 10. So if you go like say if you're going back, because I think it's like you have to do 10 left. So if you go to say 9 on accident, it's basically done. You have to restart the entire thing, which is really annoying, but it's a lot more manageable than Yuffie's just because I feel it actually gives you what you exactly have to do. You just have to time everything right. So still, I think both of these are still pretty stupid, but again, they are optional characters, so you don't have to go for them. But I think Square could have been more forgiving on some of these cases. Then we have the final thing I want to go over, and that has to be the 3D models. And frankly, most of them look bad, at least the overworld models. And I know this was Square's first time in making Final Fantasy into 3D, but looking even back at some other 3D games at the time around Final Fantasy VII's release, I will admit, even those games look a lot better than this one. And honestly, I do think that the battle models look decent, but the overworld models is what you'd be looking at for most of the time. And frankly, again, I just don't really think they look good. And even then, Square managed to outshine themselves with Final Fantasy VIII, which I think the character models in that, in both battle and in the overworld, look really nice. I just don't know how they went from the really blocky stuff of Final Fantasy VII to all the way to Final Fantasy 9, and, no, not 9, but even in some cases also 9 and 8, just in a matter of a couple of years, because those also look way better. But I guess I can be kind of forgiving since this was the first time Square did this, at least for Final Fantasy. But now, before we end the video, let's go over the likes and dislikes. Likes: fast gameplay, fun and unique magic system, good pre-rendered backgrounds, and good story and characters. Dislikes: grinding a lot for the spells, lack of unique material, stupid ways to get optional characters, and bad overworld models. Thank you guys for watching, and see you guys later.